Welcome to Skytech-Lens. The summer of 2025 marked a dramatic turning point in North American trade, one that would send ripples through the continent's economies for years to come. What began as a routine season for cross-border commerce quickly spiraled into a crisis that no one saw coming. In a matter of hours, the long-standing US-Canada economic partnership fractured overnight, shattering decades of trust and cooperation. The border, once a symbol of seamless trade, became a flashpoint of tension and uncertainty. A convoy of trucks carrying 150,000 tons of American beef, enough to feed millions, was abruptly turned away at the Canadian border. This was no accident, but a calculated act of economic retaliation, the result of escalating disputes over tariffs and agricultural policy. The rejected beef, valued at a staggering $1.2 billion, quickly piled up in U.S. cold storage facilities. Major processing plants in the Midwest were forced to halt production, leaving thousands of workers idle and sending shockwaves through the American supply chain. Supermarkets braced for shortages and prices began to climb. While U.S. farmers and ranchers reeled from the sudden loss of their largest export market, Mexico saw an unexpected opportunity. For months, Mexican officials and producers had quietly prepared for just such a scenario, building up their capacity and forging new agreements with Canadian buyers. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration moved swiftly, treating the US-Canada rift as a strategic opening. Within days, Mexican beef was on its way north, filling the gap left by American producers and cementing new trade relationships that had been months in the making. As American producers faced mounting financial losses and uncertainty about their future, a new Canada-Mexico trade axis began to take shape. This realignment was more than a temporary fix. It was a fundamental reshaping of the continent's economic landscape, with winners and losers on all sides. The fallout from this trade shock raised urgent questions about the future of North American trade. Would old alliances recover, or would new partnerships define the next era? And what would be the long-term consequences of U.S. protectionist policies for the region's farmers, workers, and consumers? The crisis began with a bold move from Washington, one that would send shockwaves across the continent and beyond. In a climate already tense with economic uncertainty, the U.S. government announced a sweeping new policy. A 35% tariff was slapped on Canadian imports, specifically targeting key agricultural goods like beef, grains, and dairy. The move was framed as a way to protect American farmers from foreign competition, but its implications were far-reaching. Instead of providing relief, the tariff sent shockwaves through the agricultural sector. American farmers, already struggling with rising costs and unpredictable weather, now faced new uncertainties. Supply chains that had long connected North American producers and consumers were suddenly thrown into chaos. Economists, who had been warning about the dangers of protectionism, watched as food prices climbed even higher, putting additional strain on families across the country. Canada wasted no time in responding. In an emergency session, Parliament passed Bill C-202, granting Ottawa sweeping powers to halt agricultural imports from any nation threatening its food security. The message was unmistakable. This was a direct response to U.S. actions, and a clear signal that Canada would no longer play a passive role in continental trade disputes. The first and most visible casualty was American beef. Over 150,000 tons were left stranded, unable to cross the border. The impact was immediate and severe, especially in states where agriculture is not just an industry, but a way of life, and a political flashpoint. Ottawa's new assertiveness marked a turning point. No longer content to be seen as the quiet neighbor, Canada prioritized national resilience and food security over long-standing alliances. The public, too, rallied behind the government's tough stance, with protests and press conferences underscoring a new era of Canadian self-determination. Meanwhile, Mexico and Canada saw an opportunity. Their leaders moved quickly to deepen talks, forging a strategic partnership designed to counterbalance U.S. influence. By strengthening their own economic ties, they hoped to create a buffer against future American volatility. This collaboration was more than just a trade agreement. It was a calculated move to reset the North American chessboard. By working together, Canada and Mexico aimed to insulate their economies from the unpredictable swings of U.S. policy, and to chart a new course for the continent's future. The era of unquestioned U.S. dominance in continental trade was over. A new, more complex balance of power was emerging, one shaped by tariffs, retaliation, and the forging of unexpected alliances. The border closures' impact hit hardest in America's agricultural heartland. For ranchers in Kansas, Nebraska, and Kentucky, Canada was a vital market, gone overnight. Unsold beef piled up, storage costs soared, and processing plants slashed hours or shut down, triggering layoffs and economic pain in rural communities. Truckers, feed suppliers, and local businesses all suffered as the supply chain collapsed. Farmers who once supported protectionist policies now faced financial ruin, betrayed by the very measures meant to help them. Despite the beef surplus, prices for consumers stayed high, fueling anger and confusion. The disruption exposed the fragility of the system and the unintended consequences of aggressive trade protectionism. The promise of protection had become a source of hardship. As U.S.-Canada trade froze, Mexico's preparations paid off. Months of behind-the-scenes talks and food safety upgrades positioned Mexico to supply Canada with high-quality beef at scale. When the U.S. was shut out, Mexico quickly filled the gap, offering rigorous safety documentation and reliable shipments. Within weeks, Mexican beef began flowing north, with long-term contracts aiming to fully replace U.S. supply by year's end. This wasn't a stopgap. It was a fundamental shift in North American supply lines. Mexico captured a $1.2 billion market and cemented itself as Canada's indispensable partner. The move shattered the myth of U.S. irreplaceability and redrew the continent's economic map. The U.S., once the hub, now faced sudden isolation. Despite a beef glut, U.S. consumers faced record-high prices, over $6 for ground beef, $11 for steak. The trade dispute's chaos added costs and bottlenecks, negating any benefit from oversupply. Food insecurity deepened as SNAP faced massive budget cuts, forcing families to buy less or settle for lower-quality food. Public schools and hospitals struggled to provide nutritious meals, cutting portions or substituting cheaper proteins. The trade war's real-world impact was felt in kitchens and cafeterias nationwide. The promise that tariffs would help Americans rang hollow as prices soared, and trust in government policy eroded. News of stranded beef shipments only fueled public anger and confusion. The disconnect between policy and reality was impossible to ignore. Canada's decision to reject U.S. beef imports was more than a simple trade dispute. It was a bold move in a larger campaign to assert economic sovereignty. For decades, Canada's economy had been closely intertwined with its southern neighbor, often leaving it vulnerable to shifts in U.S. policy and market demands. Now, Canadian leaders were determined to chart a new course, one that would reduce this dependency and give the country greater control over its own economic destiny. The 2025-26 Beef Industry Development Plan became a symbol of this new direction. It outlined a comprehensive strategy to diversify Canada's trade relationships, with a particular focus on expanding exports to Asia, the Middle East, and South America. These regions represented not just new markets for Canadian beef, but also opportunities to build lasting economic partnerships beyond North America. Central to this vision was a massive upgrade to the Port of Vancouver. By expanding and modernizing its export infrastructure, Canada aimed to open direct shipping routes to the Pacific Rim, allowing Canadian goods to reach global markets more efficiently and bypass traditional U.S. transit points. At the same time, Canada invested in new trade corridors, including ambitious rail and shipping links across Eurasia. Strengthening ties with emerging economies like Brazil, India, and Indonesia became a priority, as Canadian officials sought to weave a more resilient and interconnected global trade network. The ultimate goal was clear: to build economic resilience by cultivating a diverse portfolio of trading partners. No longer would Canada's prosperity hinge on a single neighbor. Instead, it would be anchored by a web of global relationships, each contributing to the nation's stability and growth. While the beef dispute served as a catalyst, the momentum for change had been gathering for years. Past trade tensions and policy shifts had exposed the risks of over-reliance, prompting Canadian businesses and policymakers to rethink their approach to international commerce. Now Canada was stepping onto the world stage with renewed confidence, redefining its place in the global economy. Autonomy, security, and adaptability became the guiding principles of this new era. The era of automatic U.S.-Canada integration was drawing to a close, replaced by a vision of Canadian independence and global engagement. Canada's diversification strategy reached beyond the Americas. Leveraging the CETA agreement, Canadian beef exports to the EU surged, capturing a premium market closed to most U.S. producers. Ottawa also renewed agricultural ties with China, signing new agreements to access its vast consumer base. Canada explored unconventional trade routes, including Eurasian logistics networks to reach Central Asia and the Middle East. The aim: redundancy and resilience, reducing dependence on any single partner or route. Each new agreement insulated Canada from future shocks. The pivot was a calculated gamble for long-term security and prosperity. Canada's rejection of U.S. beef sparked a crisis of confidence in American food. Though the move was political, it revived old doubts about U.S. food safety and quality, amplified by memories of past scandals. Social media and news coverage fueled suspicion, damaging the brand USA label at home and abroad. As prices soared, consumers questioned both affordability and safety, suspecting profit motives over public interest. Trust in regulatory agencies eroded, with many believing politics trumped science. The crisis threatened long-term shifts toward alternatives and imports. The beef dispute became a symbol of deeper problems in the U.S. food system. The U.S. now faces a fractured trade landscape of its own making. The administration's options are stark: double down on protectionism, risking deeper isolation and higher prices, or seek reconciliation with Canada and Mexico. Negotiation could reopen markets and ease pressure on farmers, but would require a political reversal. Alternatively, the U.S. could try to diversify exports, but faces stiff competition and a damaged reputation abroad. New trade relationships take time, offering little immediate relief to struggling producers. The cattle herd is at a 74-year low, limiting supply for new markets. The choice America makes now will shape its economic future, either as a reliable partner or in growing solitude. The world is watching to see which path it will choose. Thanks for watching Avita. And subscribe to the channel now for more updates. Thanks.